Have you ever felt like God took you away from certain people even though it hurt? As if He is setting you apart for something greater? If this question makes sense to you, then this video will open your eyes to a powerful truth. Before we start, leave a like and subscribe to the channel because this message can transform lives. And now, I want you to write in the comments, "I accept." This simple act is a sign that you accept this journey. Have you ever wondered why God allowed your mother to be a difficult figure in your life? Why didn't He, who can do everything, intervene to avoid this pain? The answer is not simple, but it is powerful. God never acts without a purpose. He allows certain pains, not as a punishment, but as a means of molding those who have been chosen for a greater mission. For those chosen, life is never simple, and family challenges are often the first big test. God knew that to fulfill your calling, you would need to be strong, resilient, and able to break destructive patterns. The challenging relationship with His mother was not a mistake of fate, but a fundamental piece of His spiritual growth. The pain you feel is not a punishment, but an instrument of transformation. God allows the chosen ones to go through periods of suffering, so that they can develop qualities that only adversity can teach: patience, empathy, the ability to overcome challenges, and the search for a greater purpose. Just as gold needs fire to be purified, you are being polished through the experiences you have lived. If your mother was a toxic figure, if she failed to offer you the love you deserved, know that this absence does not define who you are. On the contrary, it forced you to seek within yourself a strength that many people will never develop. But there is something even deeper in this process. God is calling you to something greater. If He allowed you to go through this, it is because He saw in you a spirit strong enough to not only survive, but to transform that pain into purpose. Often, it is in pain that we find our true mission. What you faced was not in vain. Your suffering can be the testimony that helps other people free themselves. Now, the question is, will you allow this pain to destroy you, or will you use it as fuel for your ascension? Since the beginning of time, those who have been called by God have faced great challenges. Suffering has never been a sign of divine forgetfulness, but rather proof that the chosen one is being prepared for something great. A relationship with a toxic mother can be one of the most difficult tests someone can face, as it questions the basis of love and acceptance. How do you move forward when the person who should protect you is often the source of your pain? This is the test. Breaking the emotional chains without losing faith, without letting bitterness dominate your heart. Many fall into the trap of resentment, becoming prisoners of past wounds. But the chosen ones cannot afford that luxury. They are called to something greater, and that means learning to forgive without allowing the toxic cycle to continue. Forgiving is not accepting abuse, but rather freeing yourself from the weight that pain carries. As long as you harbor resentment, you will be stuck in the past. But when you choose to free yourself, you are telling the universe that you are ready to advance to a new spiritual level. God watched you in every moment of suffering. He saw your tears, heard your silent prayers, and felt your pain. But He also saw their strength, their ability to resist. If you've made it this far, it's because you've overcome tests that many couldn't. And believe me, this resistance was not in vain. What seemed like punishment was, in fact, training. God did not put you in this situation to destroy you, but to prepare you. Did you pass the test? Are you ready to embrace your role as a true chosen one? The separation between you and your mother may seem like a cruel blow to life. It can hurt deeply to realize that the maternal bond, which for many is a source of security and love, has become a source of pain for you. But what if this separation wasn't a mistake? What if, in fact, it was part of a greater divine plan, designed to set you free and take you to where you truly belong? Sometimes God needs to take us away from certain environments and people so that we can grow. Many chosen ones grow up in dysfunctional homes because they were not meant to stay there. They were called to break cycles, to break patterns, to open new paths. If your mother was toxic, if your coexistence was unsustainable, perhaps God separated you because he knew that if you remained in that environment, your essence would be suffocated. He took you away so you could flourish without the shackles of pain and emotional manipulation. This doesn't mean that separation doesn't hurt. On the contrary, the process can be lonely and distressing. But when you realize that this distance is part of your journey, something changes inside you. Instead of asking yourself, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin to understand that everything happened to take you to the right place. Are you ready to accept this truth? Suffering may seem cruel and unfair, but God never wastes pain. He uses every tear, every wound, as a tool for transformation. The chosen ones do not have easy lives because they are like precious stones being cut. They need to be shaped, polished, so that they can shine with their full potential. Pain is not an end, but a means for you to become the strongest version of yourself. Think about all the difficult times you've faced. Each one of them brought you here, made you see life in a different way. You have developed an inner strength that few people possess. While many are lost in the illusions of the world, you were forced to look within, to strengthen yourself without depending on anyone. That is a gift, even if it came through pain. And now that you understand this, the question that remains is, what will you do with this force? You can use it to fuel anger and sadness, or you can turn it into something great. The world needs people who have overcome deep pain and instead of becoming victims, chose to be light. God allowed you to go through all of this because he knew you were capable of something greater. Are you ready to take on this calling? Perhaps for years you have been searching for love and acceptance where you would never find it. Perhaps you believed that if you were better, more obedient, more submissive, you would finally be able to receive the love you so desired. But here's the truth. The love you've always sought was never in your mother's hands. It was always in God. God doesn't love you with conditions. He doesn't love you for who you should be, but for who you already are. And perhaps one of the greatest lessons he wanted to teach you was this: stop looking for love where it cannot be found. Many people spend their lives trying to gain acceptance from those who have never been able to truly love. But the chosen ones learn to seek their identity in God, not in broken relationships. When you finally accept this divine love, something changes within you. The need for validation disappears. The pain of rejection loses the weight it had before. You understand that you have never been alone, and that your worth has never depended on anyone's approval. God has always been with you, waiting for you to see the truth. Can you feel this love now? Loneliness can be one of the most difficult phases of awakening. When you realize that your journey has separated you from people you were once close to, it's natural to feel abandoned. Maybe you looked around and realized that no one really understands the pain you carry. The difficult relationship with your mother, the lack of emotional support, the feeling that no matter how hard you try, you will never be understood. All of this can generate a deep emptiness. But there is something that few realize. This loneliness is not a punishment, but a calling. God uses this period to prepare you, to make you strong without depending on the validation of others. Many people spend their entire lives seeking external approval. They want to be accepted, loved, understood. But the chosen ones are forced to let go of this need. When God wants to elevate you, he first separates you. He takes away the distractions, cuts the ties that no longer serve you, and puts you in a state where the only voice left to be heard is his. It is at this moment in the silence of solitude that he begins to work in you in a deeper way. Your faith is tested, your identity is redefined, and you learn that you need no one but him to be complete. Over time, you will realize that this solitude was necessary. It was there that you found your true strength. It was there that you learned to trust God completely. And the most surprising thing, this period does not last forever. When you are ready, when your soul is strengthened and your mind is aligned with your purpose, God will begin to send the right people into your life. People who resonate with your truth, who walk in the same direction as you. But before that happens, you need to go through the desert. You need to accept loneliness as part of your preparation. Are you ready to go through this phase with faith? One of the greatest lessons of awakening is understanding that not every bond is meant to last forever. From a young age, we are taught that family is a sacred, unbreakable bond, something that must be maintained at any cost. But what happens when this bond becomes a chain? And when the relationship that should be a source of love and security turns into a weight that suffocates and impedes your growth? The truth is that God doesn't always want you to remain tied to certain connections. He created you to be free, and sometimes that freedom requires you to let go of what stops you from growing. Breaking a family bond is one of the most difficult decisions anyone can make. The feeling of guilt can be overwhelming. You may wonder if you are being ungrateful, if you should try harder, if it is your obligation to carry this burden for the rest of your life. But the reality is that God doesn't want you to live chained to relationships that drain your energy and destroy your peace. He gave you a calling, a mission, and anything that tries to stop you from fulfilling that purpose does not come from Him. Free yourself from guilt. Free yourself from the need for approval. Understand that choosing yourself is not an act of selfishness, but of obedience to the divine plan. God wants to take you to places that the old you could never reach. But to do this, you need to be willing to leave behind everything that can no longer accompany you. Are you ready to take this step? The pain you carry does not have to be an eternal burden. Yes, you suffered. Yes, the absence of true maternal love left deep marks. But these wounds are not your identity. They don't need to define who you are. What differentiates the chosen ones from others is that instead of allowing their pain to destroy them, they learn to transform it into strength. They take the scars and use them as a testimony of overcoming. Healing does not happen overnight. It demands coping. It demands that you look inside and recognize every broken piece within yourself. Many people spend their entire lives running away from this pain, trying to stifle it with distractions, empty relationships, or self-destructive patterns. But this only prolongs the suffering. True healing only happens when you face your story head-on and decide that from today onwards, your pain will no longer control you. God is ready to heal your wounds, but He cannot heal what you insist on hiding. Open yourself to this process. Allow yourself to feel, cry, release. But most of all, allow yourself to be restored. Your story does not end in pain. She's just getting started. Rejection can be one of the cruelest pains anyone can feel. The feeling of not being accepted, of not being loved the way you wanted, can leave deep marks. But there is something you need to understand. God allows rejection because He is redirecting you to the right path. He took you away from certain environments, from certain people, not because you weren't worthy of love, but because you were worthy of something much greater. Many chosen ones face rejection from an early age. They never felt like they were part of the environment they grew up in. They always felt like there was something different about them. This was not a mistake. It was God showing you that you do not belong to a common path. If everyone had accepted you, if everything had been easy, perhaps you would never have sought your true identity in God. Maybe you had settled in a place you shouldn't have been. Rejection is painful, but it is also liberating. Instead of asking, "Why wasn't I accepted?" ask yourself, "Where is God taking me?" Because one thing is certain. He doesn't take anything without a purpose. If something has been removed from your life, it is because there was something bigger in store for you. Perhaps one of the most harrowing moments of the spiritual journey is when God seems to be silent. You pray, You ask for answers, but all you get is overwhelming emptiness. It seems like he has forgotten you. But this is the biggest illusion of all. God's silence is not absence, it is invisible work. When he is silent, it is because he is acting behind the scenes, preparing something that your eyes cannot yet see. Many chosen ones face this period of silence shortly after experiencing great challenges. After everything they have suffered, they expect a quick response, a clear solution. But God does not act according to our anxiety. He works in perfect time. Silence is a test of faith, an invitation to trust without having to see. And when the right moment finally arrives, everything makes sense. You look back and realize that each delay was necessary, that each absence was strategic. God never abandoned you. He just wanted you to trust him, even when there were no signs. Are you willing to trust even in silence? Have you ever noticed that certain pains seem to be repeated generation after generation? That some families carry a continuous cycle of suffering, abusive relationships, lack of love, and lack of understanding? This is not a simple coincidence. There are spiritual and emotional patterns that are perpetuated within families, and only a few are called to break them. If you feel like you've always been different, that you've never fit into these destructive cycles, there's a reason for that. God chose you to be the one who breaks the chain. Breaking a toxic family cycle is not just a personal decision. It is an act of spiritual courage. It means saying enough is enough to patterns that have gone unnoticed for generations. It means refusing to repeat behaviors of abandonment, lack of love, lack of support. But this process is not easy. Often, the family itself resists change. They may not understand your quest for something greater. They may accuse you of being ungrateful. They may try to pull you back into the dynamic they have always known. But the truth is that those who break cycles are the ones who suffer the most at the beginning. That's why God has made you so strong. You were not chosen by chance. You carry within yourself the strength necessary to transform your story and, consequently, the story of the next generations. Even if no one supports you now, even if the path seems lonely, know that what you are doing is great. One day, those who criticize you will see that it was necessary. One day, your fight will be the basis for a new generation that will not need to carry the same weight that you did. Are you ready to be the first to change the destiny of your bloodline? It's easy to blame others for the pain we feel. It's easy to point the finger and say, if my mother had loved me the right way, I would be different. If I had grown up in a better family, my life would be different. But here's the harsh, liberating truth. No one will come to rescue you. No one will come and correct the past for you. The only person who can transform your life now is yourself. That doesn't mean your pain wasn't real. It doesn't mean that your mother didn't make mistakes, that the people around her didn't make mistakes. But what will you do with it? Will you spend your life reliving this suffering, or will you use it as fuel to create a different future? God has already given you all the tools to get out of this emotional prison. He gave you strength, intelligence, wisdom, but he cannot act for you. You need to take the first step. Self-responsibility is not about blaming yourself, but about freeing yourself. As long as you put your happiness in the hands of the past, you will remain stuck with it. But the moment you decide to take the reins of your journey, everything changes. You are not a victim of your story. You are its author. God is waiting for you to take hold of this power. The question is, will you continue living as a prisoner, or will you finally take control of your destiny? Often, the pain of separation seems unbearable. You look around and see people who grew up with close-knit families, who were loved and protected. And then you ask yourself, why was it different for me? Why did I have to suffer while others had an easier path? But here is the truth that few understand. God separates those he wants to elevate. If your path was different, if you had to face more challenges than most, it is because God has a specific plan for your life. He took you away from the ordinary the mediocre, the predictable. He didn't allow you to settle for an easy life because he knew you were born for something greater. You were not made to live automatically, repeating the same old patterns. God saw potential in you that needed to be awakened, and he knew that the only way to do this was to place you in situations that forced you to grow. When he separates someone, it is not out of punishment, but out of love. He wants you to see what others don't see. He wants you to learn to walk in faith without needing anyone's approval. And most of all, he wants you to be an example to those who are still in prison. Your mission is not small. Its purpose is not common. God separated you because you are part of something much bigger than you imagine. The question now is, are you ready to accept this mission? Those who resist transformation spend their entire lives in circles, repeating the same mistakes, facing the same pain. But those who accept God's call experience something extraordinary. When you finally decide to let go of the past and walk in faith, something incredible happens. Doors begin to open, your life gains meaning, and you begin to see the blessings that have always been around you. The victory of the chosen is not based on ease. It doesn't mean you will never face challenges again. On the contrary, it means that you will know how to deal with them without losing yourself in suffering. It means that even when the storm comes, you will have confidence that God is in control. You will begin to see connections forming, opportunities emerging, and you will realize that nothing you have experienced has been in vain. When you accept your journey, God puts you in places you never imagined. It connects you with people who speak the same language as your soul. It turns your pain into purpose and makes you a reference for others who are still lost. This is the destiny of the chosen ones. But to get there, you need to make a decision. Will you continue carrying the weight of the past, or will you surrender to the future that God has prepared for you? Now that you've come this far, there's one last thing you need to understand. No one but you can decide what happens to your life from now on. You may remain stuck in the pain, reliving the same hurts, asking yourself why. Or you can make a decision right now and say, I choose to live the purpose God has for me. The future is not predestined. God has a plan, yes, but he can't force you to follow it. He gives you free will to decide whether you want to continue carrying the weight of the past or whether you want to free yourself to live something new. The choice has always been yours. And now you need to answer, what will you do with everything you learned? If you choose the path of the chosen, know that it will not be easy, but also know that it will be extraordinary. You will see miracles happening. You will notice the transformation within you, and you will be the light that many need. This is the destiny that awaits you, but it will only become real if you make the decision today. So tell me, are you ready?